right, so this is my teaching on Jesus' parables, and we are going to begin with the word parable, which comes from a Greek word. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, parabola, I believe, but what it means is to put alongside. So what you're doing is you're taking one thing and you're putting alongside another thing. And so in the case of Jesus' parables, what he's doing is he's taking something from the culture of the Jews that would be common in their experience. Maybe it's something in their history, something in their liturgy. Often it'd be something in their agrarian practices, and he would use that to help them understand this other thing, the nature of the kingdom. So it's things in the Jewish common experience that's used to help illustrate things that are true about the kingdom. Now, having said that, often when we think about parables, we think of them as something that's used to explain. Something that's easy to understand is used to help us to understand something that's not so easy to understand. And I think on some level there's some truth to that, but really when you look at the parables themselves, you'll find that that is not really always the case. That often people are confused by the parables. And you see that actually being recorded in the gospel narratives themselves. And I know I myself, when I read parables, I look at it and go, geez, what is this about? I don't quite understand. What are you saying, Jesus? And so let me give you an example of this actually from the scriptures. In Matthew 13, 10 through 13, you have Matthew recording this, which is the disciples asking Jesus a question after they just heard Jesus provide a series of parables. This is the disciples. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He, Jesus, replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them." So some people are getting it, other people are not getting it. Some people it's being revealed, other people it's being concealed. Whoever has, so Jesus continues, whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. And he continues, though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not understand. So it seems from that passage, as well as other passages that we see in the Gospels that are similar to that, that Jesus is not always trying to make things clear. Sometimes he is trying to make things a bit unclear. He's trying to conceal instead of reveal. So what is this about? In order to explain this, I'm going to turn to the works of a gentleman named Robert Stein, the very gentleman I turned to yesterday when I was talking about Jesus' teachings in general. So Stein offers three possible reasons Jesus teaches in parables. The first one is to conceal his teaching from those on the outside. And by outside, what we mean is those who are on the outside of the kingdom, but who are, with respect to the world, insiders. So they're worldly insiders, and therefore, in many ways, they're kingdom outsiders. And you could say the reverse is true, that worldly outsiders, in many ways, are kingdom insiders. And so let me explain that a little bit more. The worldly insiders, who are the kingdom outsiders, are basically the power brokers of the world, the rich, the people who rely upon the resources of the world apart from God's grace to give them a sense of who they are and to navigate their lives and face the challenges of the world. And so that's kind of akin to what Jesus said when he talked about how hard it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. This is basically what he's talking about. And it's not that having riches in and of itself is wrong. It's just that the fact is, often when people have riches, they come to rely upon the riches instead of the grace of God. And because they're relying upon the riches or the power they have instead of the grace of God, they therefore become kingdom outsiders. And, in many ways, worldly insiders. Likewise, the outsiders of the world, the poor and the poor in spirit, the marginalized, the oppressed, the downtrodden, those are the outsiders of the world. They are often insiders in the kingdom. Now again, I would say it's not because you're poor in and of itself that makes you a kingdom insider, but it is the fact that often those people who are poor are more open to receiving the grace of God. And so it's relying upon the grace of God, acknowledging your need, and relying upon the grace of God that makes you a kingdom insider. So what Jesus wants to do is conceal the truth of the kingdom from the power brokers, those people who are not relying upon the grace of God, and yet reveal it to those who are poor in spirit, who are poor and who are looking to God, who are seeking God and God's grace. He wants to reveal the nature of the kingdom to them. And so that's how Jesus uses his parables to conceal. Now, another thing he does is he uses these parables to reveal his message to his followers. So I kind of already hinted upon that in what I just said to you about concealing and revealing. But to open that up a little bit more, a part of the reason why the kingdom insiders, those who rely upon God's grace, are the ones who receive the revelation, is because they're in the place with respect to their internal posture, with respect to their hearts. They're in the place to receive the revelation. And a large part of that is because there's a relational proximity between those people and Jesus. Because they are poor in spirit, because they are aware of their need, because they have been cast out from the structures of society, they are open, and when they hear Jesus, they resonate with Jesus because they see in Jesus a hope that they don't have in the world. They see in Jesus resources, in his self-giving love, in the power that he clearly is demonstrating on behalf of others, in service to others. And those people recognize their need for that. So they come to understand that Jesus is revealing God to them. And they come to understand the character of God, God's heart, God's self-sacrificing, serving nature. And as a result of that, because they have that posture and those eyes to see God through the ministry of Jesus, they're in the place to receive the revelation. So that when Jesus talks about the kingdom through the parables, it makes sense to them. They have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. So it's kind of related to that interior posture. And that interior posture is something they have because of their relationship with Jesus. It's that relational proximity. It's that knowledge of Jesus, that intimacy with him, knowing his character, that gives them the right eyes and ears. The eyes to see, the ears to hear. And therefore they finally, Stein says that the parables disarm his listeners. They force a response somehow, and they leave the listeners wrestling because the parables are provocative. So this actually is something akin to what Gordon Fee believes about the nature of the parables. And this is kind of my commentary on that, which is that we need to be disarmed. In various ways and in various degrees, we come to Jesus as little gods. That's perhaps the result of the fall that we see recorded in the scriptures. This goes all the way back to Genesis, and it talks about God created everything and it was good, but then there was this fall, and sin and death entered into the world, and everything was blighted by the reality of sin, and therefore nothing we see, as good as it is as good as it was. Nothing reveals the full glory of God. Nothing reveals its original design, that God is at work in the world, initially through the call of Abraham and the Jews, which then comes to completion in Jesus. So God is at work through the ministry of Jesus to restore creation back to its original integrity, beauty, and glory. And the way it's restored back to that integrity, beauty, and glory is through the grace of God. And I would argue that the very problem of the human condition is that we've come to a place where we feel like we can live without God's grace. We feel a certain autonomy or self-sufficiency. And though God is still at work in our lives in ways that we don't perceive, and so we are able to live day by day and kind of have a life of maintenance, if you will, we're able to get by, we are not the kind of people that God designed us to be, because we can only be that people through God's grace, right? So each one of us is coming to God kind of like little gods. Like, we know God is big. We know that he's sovereign. We know that he's the creator, and we are not the creator. But we still don't quite have a right sense of ourselves. We perhaps think we have more than we really do have. We perhaps think that we're more intelligent than we really are, wiser than we really are, more spiritually powerful than we really are, or socially powerful, or economic, or whatever. Powerful in some way that we really aren't. And if we really had the eyes to see that, we would understand that whatever gifts or talents or powers or resources that we have their root in God's grace to begin with. So because we have this misperception about who we are and who God is, then Jesus is using these parables to kind of upset our common perception, both about God and ourselves. That's what we mean by being disarmed. That's what Stein means by being disarmed. That's what Fee means. Now, in some way, we need to be disarmed so that the illusions that we are living by is cast down, and we can finally see. So, for this reason, I believe the parables are kind of like an invitation from God. Because it's not that we should seek to crack the code, like here's the parable, I don't quite understand it, let me see if I could run the formula and figure out what it's actually saying. It's really an invitation to wrestle with God. And in that wrestling with God, if the parable evokes something in you that's negative, or if it evokes confusion, that then becomes an opportunity for prayer. That becomes an opportunity to bring it to God. And in that relationship with God, perhaps things will become clearer. Because that's ultimately what God wants, is a relationship with us. And so the ideas that are communicated in the parables, which are provocative, can become that opportunity when we wrestle with it, when we take it to God in prayer. And then, little by little through that wrestling, what I imagine happens is we get in touch with our need. We get in touch with the fact that we don't know what we thought we know. And we get in touch with the fact that perhaps we're not as strong as we think we are, or there's so much more going on in the universe and in God's care of creation that we can never get our heads around it. And so at the end of the day, we're just going to have to make a choice to trust. But often trust does not come easy. Before we really learn to genuinely trust, we have to wrestle. And I think the parables ultimately is that invitation to wrestle. And so that's what I think is being offered as we read through the parables. As you're reading through this, some of them you might resonate with immediately. Others, perhaps not so much. And that's not a bad thing. Think of it as an opportunity. Think of it as God's opportunity to come, draw near Him, and wrestle with Him, to come to know Him, His character, what He is like, and as an opportunity where God is going to reveal His grace to you as you enter into that place in your heart that is able to receive that grace, and therefore the understanding that the parables are trying to communicate to you. That is Jesus' parables. And that is it for now. Bye.